How many people would say that the government is getting a little intrusive lately? How many people feel that? I feel it. The government is just reaching its fingers into every pot they can. And so here is the ugly. This is what's coming. It's not in the news, no one's talking about it, but this is what's coming. It's called the Corporate Transparency Act. And it was passed in 2020. And the idea is that they're going to combat money laundering by requiring every corporation, LLC, and LP to disclose certain information. All right? They're going to require, how many people have an LLC or corporation? Okay, a lot of you, almost all of you. How many people have two or more? Yeah. You are going to have to file a statement with the U.S. Treasury Department identifying the name of the LLC and the owner, all right? No one's talking about this. Now, the idea is to combat money laundering. Ooh, money laundering, such a bad thing. How many people have ever been involved in a transaction that involved money laundering? Anyone? No. You know, I've dealt with thousands of transactions. I have never dealt with money laundering. I talked to Tom Wheelwright. He's done thousands of transactions. Never a case of money laundering, right? I talked to 3 CPAs in Reno. We were having lunch, and these guys had about 100 years of experience with them. And one guy said, yeah, he knew of a money laundering case where the Mexican cartel was laundering money to buy a duplex in Reno. And we kind of laugh, like, those cartel guys know where to invest. But there was only one case. This is not a huge problem. Money laundering can be picked up by the banks and the IRS. If the FBI would do their job, they could pick it up. But instead, they're asking every single one of you to file a form with the Treasury Department identifying this information. So, you have an LLC. You have to identify those who own or control 25% of the company, and those who exercise substantial control over the company. Now, the final regulations on this have not come out. And I'm guessing that the final regulations come after the midterm elections. Because if they release them now, there's just another reason to be angry at Congress. This filing requirement means every one of you has to file this form. And they say the database is going to be secure. Does anybody believe a government database is secure? No. So, moving on. So the required information on the form is your name, your birth date, your address, and an ID number from your driver's license or passport, and an image of the driver's license. And then our firm is going to help people submit these because it's the law. We're going to help our clients. So you've got to, typically you're going to pay someone. You can file it yourself, but a lot of people don't want to, don't have the bandwidth. And so we're going to provide this service. Now, do I want to provide this service? No. This is a terrible law. This is just more government intrusion. And so I don't want to provide this service, but I'm going to have to because my clients are going to need this help. So the penalties, if you don't file this form, $500 per day, up to $10,000, and 2 years in prison. Yeah, 2 years in prison. So if you are, a protester or somebody who says, I am not filing this form, the government is going to make examples of people and put them in jail for 2 years. This is what we have now in Washington. And so when you're talking to candidates this election season before November, you got to ask them, are you going to repeal the Corporate Transparency Act? And if they don't even know what it is, that's a sign, right? Most people, how many people have ever heard of the Corporate Transparency Act? Anyone? A couple. No one knows about this. It's this big secret. And then they're going to put this requirement that every single LLC has to file this form. Now, they say that hackers, if you hack into the database that the government has, there'll be a $250,000 fine and 5 years in prison, all right? How many hackers do you know have ever been caught? Has anybody ever heard of a hacker being arrested? So the government, it was really funny, the government came out with this Corporate Transparency Act. It was March of 2021. They started talking about it. And the week they announced it, they said, we're going to have FinCEN, the U.S. Treasury Department, is going to have this really secure database. And no one ever hacks into a government database. They announced this, and 3 days later was the SolarWinds hack, where 16 government agencies lost all of their information. So not a lot of trust or security in the government saying that they're going to protect this information. All right? Who gets the information? Well, this giant database with all your personal information in it, what real estate you own, what businesses you have. You pay your taxes. Isn't that enough? Isn't that all they need? Is you paying your taxes. The IRS has plenty of information on you. But this database is going to be open to the FBI and CIA. Now, has the FBI acted with integrity in the last 10 years? Absolutely not. Robert talks about a collapse. If there's a collapse, they need to replace all the head leadership at the FBI because they're letting us down. Right? Let's hear it. I agree. Let's look at what happens when the FBI can dive into this database. What happens if they decide that you're supporting the wrong people? What happens if they say, Joe over here, we don't like who he makes his political contributions to. Let's go in the database and see what he's got. Oh, he owns some farmland. Let's send the EPA in. Let's make Joe's life miserable. Is this a good system to have? This is really a bad law. So again, when you're talking to your congressman, you got to say, we got to get rid of this law because this database is going to be hacked and all your information is going to be gone. This is not a way to combat money laundering, requiring all of us to pay $200 a year per entity to file this information. All right, so timeline. Once they announce the rules after the midterm elections, you have 1 year to file if you're an existing company. If the rules are in place and you file for a new LLC or corporation, you have 14 days to get this information to the Treasury Department. So just know, if you're going to be setting up LLCs to invest in real estate, you've got to get that information to the U.S. Treasury Department within 14 days. Just another thing to do, all right? Okay, so that's it. I'm sorry for the rant, but no one knows about this law, and it affects every single one of you. And having a database with this kind of information in it is just not a good idea.